The Texas Rangers both get great news and some really bad news to begin the day. They bring in Kevin Pillar on a minor league deal. He will threaten for a fourth outfield spot, especially if they continue to have troubles with left-handed pitching out of center field. Then they get the news that one of the top 100 prospects in the game, Alexander Rosario, is going to need Tommy John surgery. So best of wishes for him, and we'll see how he recovers in 2026. Today's video, we're going to get into the 2025 season preview for the Baltimore Orioles. We'll dig in on the New York Yankees and what they've been up to in the Los Angeles Dodgers. We'll touch on the injury issues with the Boston Red Sox and where they stand heading into the 2025 season. That and much more ahead next here at The Upside. And welcome into the MLB Hot Stove Daily here at the Upside Sports Network. My name is Michael. Appreciate you guys joining us on a Sunday evening. Hopefully you guys had some fun with your families today. But it's time to talk some baseball. We'll start with the Texas Rangers. The big blow, of course, is their top 100 prospect, Alejandro Rosario, is going to need UCL surgery. He will be out for the entirety of the 2025 season. I guess the rule of thumb is still true for the Texas Rangers. If you're a top pitching prospect for the Texas Rangers, expect bad injury news. That's just the way it's been going for the Texas Rangers as far as their ability to develop pitching prospects for basically since I've been following the team. This has basically been, 20 plus years of an issue for a Rangers organization that just can't get any injury luck with any of their top pitching prospects. The only one who really didn't have injury issues was Jack Leiter, and he got blown up in his first couple of years in the minor league system there. So, it's just been a rash of bad injury luck. You can't really finger point any one specific thing. All I will say is, with as much issues that they've had, as far as the pitching issues that they've had to endure, the injuries as far as their big prospects, I wonder if there's something that they could do differently. I have no idea what that could be. But I am saying that this team has suffered so many of their top prospects getting hurt, and almost all of them on the pitching side, that something needs to be done as far as looking into that. They have one of the best injury specialists in Kevin Meester as one of the team doctors. He is one of the doctors that is actually used across the entire league when it comes to injury issues, when it comes to surgeries. So I'm surprised that they're continuing to have this issue, even with such good medical personnel already on the payroll there. On the positive side here, hopefully he comes back in 2026 and comes back guns are blazing. We saw Kumar Rocker have his own injury issues, and he looks fantastic. We've seen other prospects come back at different times and come back and look like themselves once again, but it's another year of development lost here for Rosario, who really came out of nowhere last year and established himself as a top 100 prospect. So best of wishes for him. Other positive news, the Texas Rangers did bring in Kevin Pillar to enter that outfield mix. He was the one I was kind of hoping for as a Rangers fan that would enter this mix as a right-handed bat for them. Really like what he brings to the table as far as that leadership, veteran ability, clubhouse, all those kinds of things. Hit .229 last year, so I'm not expecting him to be a world beater, but I'm expecting him to at least be a productive hitter when he's in the lineup, because he's not going to be in there every day. He's only going to be in there against lefties, and that's only if Evan Carter and Leody Taveras still continue to struggle against left-handed pitchers anyway. If one of those two catches fire against lefties, maybe Kevin Pillar will start the season in AAA or opts out of his deal and goes on to another team during the year. But I think it's a good signing as we head towards opening day for Texas, a good insurance policy because he can at least handle left-handed pitchers a little bit better, at least at the moment, than both of the other two options have proven to be as of yet. Now, it's still early in spring training. Rafe, I know your comment there, it's spring training, but geez, come on, Rangers. I get it. It is spring training, but again, just your comment there says it all. It's spring training. Guys are working on things. My reaction yesterday to Molly was more of a continuation of an issue we saw last year when he was giving up home runs in his 3 starts that he made last year. Again, small sample size, but he continued to have that same trend this spring when he gave up 2 hard hit balls already in his first spring training start. That I'm a little bit more worried about. As far as the Rangers offense coming around, I'm not too worried about that. They have a much better offensive roster than what they had last year. A lot of the offense really disappeared from this lineup last year, and they're going to get better. The question is, how soon will it develop? How soon will those bats be in place, and how soon will they catch fire? I don't think that'll be an issue this year as far as them catching fire. I think it's just a matter of when. Whereas last year, they didn't really follow up the success that they had in 23 with the same fervor on the offensive side that they did in 24. They lost Mitch Garver. That wasn't the reason they had such a dip in production. Seager had a down year. Simeon had a down year. Heim, one of the worst offensive pieces in all of baseball last year. Garcia came into the year hurt after injuring himself in the World Series, or the run-up to the World Series, and then in the World Series again, and then entered spring basically dinged up a little bit, got a slow start to spring training last year, and then got dinged up again during the regular season, which really hampered his swing throughout the entirety of the year. So a fully healthy Adolis Garcia, I'm expecting bigger things. And then, of course, you had the fluke injury to Josh Young as well. Hopefully he can afford more of those fluke injuries. He just seems to collect them at this point, but hopefully they can wrap him in bubble wrap until the start of the season at least, but we'll see here. But the Rangers get both positive and negative news this morning, and hopefully they get a little bit better news on the injury front as the rest of the spring continues to unfold. Welcome in, Cowboys Nation. Holly, welcome back. Mark, we are very excited to do this video for you. I know you were looking forward to the Baltimore Orioles season preview. You will get it today, so be sure to hit that like and subscribe if you haven't already. We will do our Baltimore Orioles 2025 season preview video after we catch up on all the other news of the day. Let's see here. Spring training, yes. No worse than the Mavs, though. Yeah, the Mavs did not play well against Golden State. I caught a little bit of that game. I think you could see the way the game was going to go based off of the first 6 minutes. Mavericks didn't have that same connectivity as far as, the ball was on a string for them in their run-up to this game. This game, it just didn't look that way. Max Christie was off, it seemed like, with his shot anyway in the majority of the game. And this game was over, to me, by the 6-minute mark of the first quarter. I think the white flag should have been up by that point, but they at least tried, I guess, is the best way you can describe it. They kept Kyrie's minutes down, kind of, if you call 32 minutes down, but at least they saved him a little bit there. Holly Rafe, they had a lead until the non-roster guys gave it up. I will say that the Rangers, again, it's spring training. Their offense did finally awaken today. That's the good news for the Texas Rangers. Yeah, I saw some of the stuff on them, but yeah, I get it. Steven, welcome in. Was Jason Dominguez working on how to catch the ball? Not sure. I'm not sure what you're referencing there. I know you're talking about Jason Dominguez, but I don't remember seeing any news, anything about Jason Dominguez today. If you want to update us, I'd be glad to hear it anyway. Other news of the day, the Cardinals are open to moving Eric Fetty, their starting pitcher. That's kind of been a known item throughout the entirety of the offseason. No team really was looking to try to acquire him when the Cardinals originally made the move for him. They needed some depth in that starting pitching. Right now, they're going a bit of a youth movement, and they're holding on to Sonny Gray and some other veteran starting pitchers. Eric Fetty could be one of the guys that they try to offload first to free up some innings for some younger starting pitchers to at least get a taste of the big leagues before they get to the All-Star break. Eric Fetty could be a good fit for a team that's looking for a number 4 or 5 starter if they have an injury issue in their rotation. Think of teams that could use an injury fill-in here, like the New York Mets if they wanted to fill in for Frankie Montas. Doesn't seem like that's going to be the case or the route they go down, but it's still an option for them. He's only making, I believe, $7.5 million, something along those lines. Relatively inexpensive contract there. As far as the Cardinals, though, again, they're going more of a youth movement. Conversation still centers around whether or not they can get a deal done for Nolan Arenado. Arenado has said he's unwilling to change his no-trade list, and we'll have to see if he amends that as we get closer to opening day. Other news, Mariners add a minor league reliever, Trevor Gott, on a deal there. Dominguez had another drop. That's not good. I know he had his defensive limitations last year with the Yankees. Tough to see that in spring training, but again, it's spring training. It's still early. We'll have to see how he gets or how he performs once we get to the regular season before we make any real judgments. But you'd really like to see that issue would have been solved in the offseason, having more of a hardened approach to, or more disciplined approach to fielding balls in the outfield. That'd be something I would hope to work down in the offseason. And hopefully this is just a one-off for him. It is still spring training. Other news, Donovan Solano is finally in Mariners camp after finally having his visa issues cleared up. I don't really like talking politics at all on this channel, so I don't really want to get into the visa issues of it. I will say he's just a little bit behind the 8 ball here as we've just begun spring training, and now he's just getting to loosen up with his current team. So good on the Mariners for at least getting a bat like Solano in there. I would have liked to seen these visa issues cleared up earlier, but because he signed so late, I'm sure is what caused some of those visa issues there. Alex Bregman did hit a home run in his game today with the Boston Red Sox, his first with the team. And last bit of news is Vladimir Guerrero Jr. is once again open to all 30 teams. We heard that yesterday, but in what is this, day 3 now of the Vladimir Guerrero circus there in Toronto, it is now abundantly clear he would even consider the New York Yankees. So, like I said, once you don't get that extension done with Vladimir Guerrero Jr., every single day, every single press conference, every interview with every player, every manager, every equipment manager, every trainer on that team is going to be asked, what are you doing to try to lure Vladimir Guerrero Jr. or convince him to sign here? How much money are you going to free up? What does this team do around Vladimir Guerrero Jr. to show him that you're a team ready to win even without him, so that he wants to stay as a member of the Toronto Blue Jays? And this is just a very, very, very small sample size of some of the headlines we're going to be getting around Vladimir Guerrero Jr. This is only day 3 of the circus, and we've already got news items each and every day so far. So it's still early in spring training. I get it. Reporters are trying to get their stories out, set people up for the MLB season, but this is going to be an ongoing problem for the Blue Jays organization, and they made this headache themselves. They could have quieted all this down 2 off seasons ago and tried to get that extension done. Last off season, tried to get that extension done. This offseason, they tried and failed to get that extension done, and they only have themselves to blame. So we'll have to see where he goes. Mark Cannon, we did mention that one yesterday. I believe he signed, if I remember correctly, the Brewers. Yes, he did go to the Brewers anyway. Just consulting my notes anyway. But a good bench bat for them if he does break through on the active roster there. Alrighty, appreciate you guys joining us. Let's go ahead and get into the Baltimore Orioles 2025 season preview. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe here on YouTube. It does mean a lot to us when you interact in the chat. Hit those hearts in the chat as well. It means a lot to us. It does help drive some viewership here, so it really does mean a lot when you do help us out like that. Super chats that you've sent over the last couple weeks have been very beneficial, so I want to thank you once again for doing those things. All right, so without further ado, the 2025 season preview for the Baltimore Orioles. Welcome into the 2025 season preview for the Baltimore Orioles. My name is Michael here at the Upside Sports Network. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe here on YouTube. Does mean a lot to us when you hit those subscribe buttons, so I really do appreciate those of you who have decided to join us here at the Upside. Every single day we'll bring you the latest from the MLB, every rumor, every news item, updates to your rotation, updates to your lineup, bullpen, what's going on with your minor league prospects, every bit of news that you could possibly want from your favorite team. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe and stay up to date on all the latest information from all 30 ball clubs. All right, today is the 2025 season preview video for the Baltimore Orioles. Let's get into it. Now, Baltimore has a really good team, as evidenced by the Adley Rutschman, the Gunnar Hendersons of the world, and their ability to get to the postseason each of the last couple of years. They have a very good, very young, up-and-coming roster here. So what did they do? What does their roster look like going into the 2025 season? We'll start with their projected lineup. Gunnar Henderson, of course, looks like he's going to lead off. Adley Rutschman is your catcher. Really a big advantage to have him still at catcher right now. That's the one thing I will point out here about the Baltimore Orioles is that they can deploy one of the best offensive pieces in their entire lineup, possibly one of the best offensive pieces in the game at that catcher spot, where most catchers in baseball are not productive offensive pieces, let alone at the level of Adley Rutschman. That's a big ace up the sleeve right now that the Orioles have to be able to pounce and capitalize on. We'll see if they are able to do so. Ryan O'Hearn currently penciled in as the DH. They will have kind of a platoon option there. Westberg is your third baseman. Cowser just kind of established himself last year, Rookie of the Year voting and all that kind of thing. He's your fifth place hitter in right field. Left field, you got Tyler O'Neill. Mullins is in center. They have Mountcastle at first base, and Jackson Holiday projected to make the start opening day lineup anyway at second base, hitting ninth. So really good talent from top to bottom here. Really the only spot here that I see, not great production at right now is in center field with Cedric Mullins. He's kind of fallen on tougher times offensively the last couple of years as these younger pieces have come up, but they brought in several outfielders this offseason to kind of mitigate any issues they have in that outfield. Remember, they no longer have Anthony Santander. They decided to go a little bit cheaper, save a little bit of money here. About half the contract, Tyler O'Neill, is what he got, around 3 years, $49 million, I believe. Anthony Santander got 5 years at $91 million with, or $93 million with a deferred $61 million total that could go up to 6 years with $110 million with incentives and the option picked up here. So they decided to go a little bit cheaper, a little bit shorter term deal by going with Tyler O'Neill. He has had some injury issues in the past, so again, picking up those extra outfielders is really going to prove quite useful for them. Looking at their bench, Gary Sanchez, they signed a little bit later in free agency. He pencils in as a backup catcher for them. Ramon Urias, a good infielder, flex him all over the diamond, primarily over there at third base, a little bit of second, some first base. Heston Kjerstad is going to be on the MLB roster according to Fangraphs. I would expect him to be there as well. Very little MLB time so far, but he is going to be a force to be reckoned with, I imagine, at some point here with the Baltimore Orioles. I imagine in the second half of the year we'll see a lot more of Kjerstad than we will Tyler O'Neill. I think they'll probably shift O'Neill a little bit more to DH at that point. Or if Cedric Mullins is having his issues out there, maybe they use Kjerstad out there as well. Ramon Laureano, another good outfielder, one of those veterans that I mentioned that they brought in late in free agency. I imagine he'll get some run out there in center field if Mullins continues to have those offensive struggles here. So I like what they did. They've got some really good high-end talent. Henderson, Rutschman, Westberg, I really like that one as well. Cowser, and then, of course, the lottery ticket there in Holiday. Then they've really got a very nice bench and some depth in their minor leagues. We'll touch on those in just a moment. But overall, this is a very good offensive team. Offensively, this should be a team that gets into that 90-win category relatively easily. Let's look at the pitching staff here. The one omission you'll notice, there's no Corbin Burns at number 1 right now. They don't have an ace on this roster. They're currently penciling in Zach Eflin to be their Game 1 starter. That's not going to get it done in a playoff series. In the regular season, you might be able to get by with it and be able to still win 90, 91, 92, 93 games. But if you're looking for an ace, somebody who gives you that level of production, Eflin ain't the guy. Rodriguez ain't the guy. Morton ain't the guy. Kramer ain't the guy. Sugano ain't the guy. They just don't have anybody on this roster currently capable of being a number 1 here. Now, could they have a whole bunch of number 2s? You're darn right. Eflin could, at his best, be a number 2. More realistically, a 3 or a 4. Rodriguez could be a number 2 at his absolute best. More realistically, a 4, probably a 3. Morton, at his best, probably a number 2. More realistically, a 3 or a 4. Dean Kramer, probably at his best, a number 3. At worst, a 4 or a 5. Sugano could have the upside of a number 2. More realistically, a 3 or a 4. Again, he's just getting adapted to the MLB game. So I really like this team from an offensive perspective. But again, where's the Game 1 starter once you get to October? That's the real issue for me. I think the pieces that they have in this rotation are all really good as far as being able to keep you afloat and having, flexibility here with their team. But I think this is a real chance for them to go out there at the trade deadline or even before then and address a serious position of need, and that's a number 1 at the head of the rotation. We've heard all offseason long that they were trying to bring back Corbin Burns. They were looking into the possibility of Dylan Cease. Cease is still out there. We've heard some of the conversations as far as trade talk have centered around Cease going to Baltimore. In the meantime, Mayo or Basayo would go back to the Padres. Doesn't look like that's going to happen. That's way too much value going back to San Diego. That trade price would have to come down for Dylan Cease to happen. I would like to see them go after more of a long-term piece. We've discussed this in our videos every single evening about how the Orioles really need to go after some controllable starting pitching, ace-level starting pitching, guys like Pablo Lopez, Sandy Alcantara, pitchers along that line that can take the ball in Game 1 and you don't feel behind the 8 ball. There were rumblings this offseason about them trying to trade for Luis Castillo. I think at this point in his career, he's probably at best a number 2 in somebody's rotation. At times could flex up to be a number 1 if necessary. The rumbling around that time was anyway Mountcastle would go back to Seattle in that trade. Mariners have since said they're not going to trade Luis Castillo. They want to keep that rotation intact. That took another option off the board there. There were rumblings that they could go after Max Scherzer, Nathan Eovaldi. They missed on both of those as well. Eovaldi, I think, is a really good number 2 at this point. I don't think he's a number 1 anymore. Scherzer, I think he's seen his best days go by, but I still think he's at least a good number 3 at this point. Probably more realistically a 3 or a 4. But if he's pitching well, he could flex up to a number 2 at any given time during a season. But again, notice how none of these options are bona fide number 1s outside of the two names I mentioned, Pablo Lopez and Sandy Alcantara. As we get closer to the trade deadline, maybe a few names that we haven't mentioned will pop up again. We'll talk about Framber Valdez from the Houston Astros if they fall out of contention in the AL West. There's a few other teams that have some starting pitching that they could trade at the deadline if they fall out of contention. The Diamondbacks, they're the one team that did bring in Corbin Burnes. They have plenty of starting pitching. They're still looking to offload Jordan Montgomery before the start of the season. It's starting to look like they're going to have to hold on to him at least for the beginning of the year. However, if things go poorly for the Diamondbacks, I don't expect they will, but say they get out of the gates really slow and they start the season, 7-21, and they just coast to the All-Star break and they're still, 10, 15 games under 500 by that point, then we could revisit the idea of them possibly trading one of Zach Gallen or Merrill Kelly, who are both expected to be free agents at the end of the year. They signed Corbin Burnes with a thought that if they, were held over a barrel for both of those guys, that at least they'd have one ace up their sleeve already in Corbin Burnes, that they could try to then sign one of those two guys at a number that they're more comfortable with and let the other one walk in free agency. If things are going poorly for the Arizona Diamondbacks, maybe they could try to trade one of those guys at the deadline, try to get a little bit better than a compensation pick back for them, and get a piece back that they want from another club and help a team out for a pennant run this year. Meanwhile, of course, they'd have Burnes. Then they could focus their attention on trying to sign the other guy who doesn't get traded at the deadline. Maybe they surprise us and trade both. They have some starting pitching depth there already. They could utilize that starting pitching depth and just go with a younger rotation next year as well. That's another possibility there in Arizona. So, like I said, it's still way too early to figure out who's going to be available at the trade deadline, but suffice to say, the Orioles are going to be very active at that deadline. They need an ace on this pitching staff. Cowboys Nation, Adley put some muscle on, must have been working out with O'Neill, very possibly. Helps to have a workout warrior in the gym with you. Basayo going to be a stud, but I find it hard to imagine him having a long career catching at 6'5", 250. I agree. I think him being a bigger sized catcher probably limits him to maybe 5 to 8 years of catching at the big league level before they have to move him out to DH or first base. That's what they're going to have to do with Adley Rutschman, though, anyway, because you see most catchers eventually move out from behind the plate. That's why having him behind the plate right now, Rutschman that is, that's such a huge advantage for the Orioles because they have a good offensive piece at catcher where they're not having to move him over to DH because they need a better, more defensive-minded catcher there. So they have to utilize that advantage. And right now, because they don't have an ace, I think they're leaving a little bit of meat on the bone. A little bit of an opportunity here this offseason was there for them to go out there and add another ace-level starting pitcher. They ultimately failed to bring in Blake Snell early in free agency as well. Another ace that slipped through their fingers. We'll see which way the Baltimore Orioles go to solve that issue. Welcome in, Hank. No matter what, there's always an upside. Sports Network. Thank you, Hank. Appreciate you joining us once again. Cowboys Nation, Grayson could take a stride and be that guy, but it's asking a lot with his shoulder issues. I wouldn't be surprised if he has a solid year. You'd think he's taking advantage of having Burnes. He and Burnes were pretty friendly this year. You saw even in the offseason when Burnes was a free agent, Rodriguez was actually saying that he was messaging him, talking to Burnes, etc. They had a good connection there. So it wasn't necessarily that he didn't like the clubhouse there in Baltimore. It's just that he wanted to go closer to home with the Arizona Diamondbacks. Otherwise, I think he probably would have gone to the San Francisco Giants because they would have been offering him more money. Baltimore has been notoriously stingy so far as giving out those long-term contracts. Remember, the biggest contract they've signed is Chris Davis, and we saw how that one worked out for them. Maybe they're a little bit leery of giving a contract out of that length. That's why we keep talking about them going after a controllable starting pitcher, somebody they're not going to have to worry about giving the big buku bucks to in free agency. We'll see if they go that route to solve their rotation issues. As far as the note on Grayson Rodriguez, I don't think he has that stride in him. Even if things work great for Grayson Rodriguez, I don't think he's a number one anymore. I don't think he does have that elevation left within him. Could he elevate to number two? Very likely. I think he could if he, everything breaks the right way. But I'm not counting on it. I'm counting on him being a solid number three in this rotation. If he's, not pitching well, maybe a number four. I still think he's a solid piece in this rotation. He just doesn't have that ability to be the guy that you look at in the locker room and say, hey, boys, we're on a 4-game losing streak. Today's win day because we have Grayson Rodriguez on the mound. That's not what the boys are saying in Baltimore. They're looking at Grayson Rodriguez and saying, hey, we have just as good a chance to win today as we did yesterday because we have another number 3 starter on the mound today after having Dean Kramer go yesterday and we lost. Now we'll have Grayson Rodriguez go today. Same type of ability, maybe a little bit better, a higher upside guy, but a guy I would look very similarly to all the other guys in this rotation. I see a lot of beige in this rotation. I don't see a lot of color here. I don't see a lot of ability to elevate their game. That's what I'm really saying here. A lot of the same, everything just looks the same in that rotation. Where's the variability? Where's the better performance? Where's the risk that you're taking by giving a bigger contract to get that higher end performance? And the Orioles, as of yet, have not addressed that issue. Eflin, etc. around, yes. I see them working Basayo to move to first eventually, but I don't think they'll do it to start the year. Looking at the bullpen for the Baltimore Orioles, love the addition of Kittredge, gives them a little bit more length, especially when you're trying to work back Felix Bautista from injury last year. They also have Yenier Cano, they have Gregory Soto, Perez, Suarez, also all very good options here for the Orioles as far as the bullpen. They have a very nice group of relievers here. As far as pitchers who are going to be starting the year on the injured list, Tyler Wells, Trevor Rogers, and Kyle Bradish are going to be able to give them some reinforcements at some point this year. We'll have to see about Bradish as far as when to expect him back. I would expect him back late in the season, probably talking August, maybe early September. I'd expect somewhere around there. As far as how many innings is he going to be able to give you at that point, I think anything that he gives you would be pure gravy. I'm not counting on those guys that are on that injured list right now to give them some significant significant innings out of those injured guys. Jorge Mateo had elbow surgery, internal brace. He'll be out for a significant period of time as well. Looking at the minor league system here, Basayo is the one guy we mentioned here. As far as a catcher here, they have Buenuelos as well. Nothing else really to report. First base, not too much there. Second base, nothing really there either. Mayo, of course, at third base, it looks like they're penciling him in to get about 125 at-bats this year. Maybe they'll give him some run at the big league club this year if they have injury issues. Shortstop, they already have Mateo, of course, on injury, but nobody else here expected to get any real time at the big league level. Outfield, this is where they got the depth options that I was referring to. Dylan Carlson, Daz Cameron, I already knew about. They already had Beavers as a non-roster invitee, one of their prospects as well. Bradfield could be a factor at some point in the next couple of years. But right now, looking at the pieces who could be on the big league roster at some point this year, Carlson, Cameron, Gordon, Beavers, those are the names I'm keeping an eye out for as well. Franklin Barreto is another piece that was a shortstop coming up. You might remember him as one of the top shortstop prospects for the A's long time ago. Yankees, if I remember correctly, as well. He is now with the Orioles as an outfielder at this point. Starting pitching, who do they have to turn their attention to in the minors? Cade Povich, they're expecting a few innings out of him, probably about 89, 90 innings there. A couple of other young guys that they could get a few more innings there as well. Minor league guys, non-roster invitees in the bullpen. Just kind of see if anybody catches my eye here. Ronzi Contreras, he's had his name thrown around a couple of different times so far this offseason as a waiver claim, those type of things. They're expecting a few innings out of him. Selby is another guy they're expecting about 50 innings out of. A lot of guys here. Trying to see if any of these names I recognize here. Martin rings a bell. Corbin Martin rings a bell. Rodolfo Martinez rings a bell. Dylan Coleman rings a bell. Matt Bowman as well. Nobody that really kind of elevates this roster, though, in my opinion, on the relief side coming from the minor leagues. But when it comes to bullpen arms, every year there always is a good option. There's always have a good year, and then they always have a bad year the year after. It's just the way bullpens are. They're always mercurial. And maybe a couple of these guys catch fire in the minor leagues. They call them up at some point. But I think their bullpen is relatively set the way it is right now. I think they're pretty solid the way they're currently set up. Let's see here. See them working with South first. Elias isn't signing any pitcher to 30-plus long-term. He never has and proved it again with Burns. You know, if he offered, say, 5 or more years with the same options minus deferment, Burns very well could have come back. I'll agree with you there. I do think that if they had a bigger offer on the table, he would have considered it because they didn't even have an offer anywhere close to that. There was no point in even really arguing it. I think the Giants were far and away the favorite until the Diamondbacks became his preferred destination. And obviously, the Orioles were not a fallback option for him because they weren't willing to go to the term that he really needed there. Mark Povich is really going to impress this year. I'll give you that one with pitch with increased confidence and stuff. I'm hoping for that for you, my friend. But they have a lot of number 2, 3, 4 types in that rotation already. I think he will get some work at the big league level this year. The question is, how many innings does he really give you? And do they trade him to be able to bring in another number 1 type starter? He could be one of the pieces that would be a fit there. Joshua, welcome in. Appreciate you joining us. Fernando Tatis Jr. trade to the Yankees, 2025. I don't think that's going to happen, unfortunately. I think the time to trade it for Fernando Tatis was a couple of years ago when he had that suspension, when the front office was upset with him. There was an opportunity there to strike while the iron was hot and get him as value was his lowest. Obviously, other teams wanted him to serve that suspension, see how he comes back, see if he stops being a knucklehead, those kinds of things, see if he stops falling off of motorcycles. That offseason, apparently, he had lost track of the number of motorcycle accidents he had been in, so luckily he is healthy. But Fernando Tatis Jr., I don't think the Padres have any interest in moving him right now. Now, if they get to the trade deadline and they're so far out of first place, so far out of the wild card, they're just looking for any and all ways to save money, an organizational mandate to trim the payroll by 50, 60, 70 million dollars, a complete and total fire sale. Maybe they consider it at that point. But look at how many things I said just had to happen for it to get to that point, and I don't see that happening. Would he be a great, versatile defender for them in the outfield? Absolutely. Would be a great addition to this team from a speed perspective on the base paths? Absolutely. Would his swag and carrying a team type of abilities that Juan Soto brought to the Yankees and ultimately left to go to the Mets? Does he bring some of those great intangibles with him? Absolutely. But it's not going to happen, at least not at this point. All right, we discussed a lot about where the current roster sits for the Baltimore Orioles. Let's look at their prospect pool here. The top 100 guys, they have only 2. Both of them are in the top 15. Both are very good. Basayo and Mayo, both of them are at the AAA level. Mayo could be a little bit more of an impact piece for them, though, this year. I think Basayo more than likely spends the majority of the season in the minor leagues or is traded as part of a deal that gets them a number 1 type starter. So what do the rest of their prospects look like? Let's kind of go to the 24 side because they don't have the listings yet for the Orioles as far as the organization itself. Mayo, of course, was at the top last year. Basayo, you have Honeycutt, Bradfield, all these really good prospects for them. Had decent years. Beavers has seen a nice little elevation in his game a little bit over the last year or so as well. Then you get pretty much into A-ball, double A level prospects that aren't going to make a big impact this year. But your impact prospects, Mayo and Basayo at the top, Bradfield as well. As far as the wins of the offseason for me, Baltimore didn't do any big mistakes outside of not acquiring a number 1 starting pitcher. They saved a little bit of money by going after Tyler O'Neill rather than bringing in Anthony Santander. I thought that was a good signing, but they needed to do more, and they did more by bringing in all those outfielders that I mentioned. Nick Gordon, Daz Cameron, Dylan Carlson, among others, Ramon Laureano to kind of help fill out that outfield rotation if they have injury issues there. Because again, Mullins has had some down years the past couple of years offensively. O'Neill has had his injury issues in that outfield. Cowser is still 1 year removed from being a rookie in the league, and so they really needed to get some more talent out there, some more depth for them. Hurstead is going to be a nice piece for them this year, but they needed more depth, and they got it in spades. I really like what they did as far as positional flexibility in the outfield. The question becomes, what do they do for that starting rotation? And that, to me, is the biggest mistake, the biggest miss of the offseason is not acquiring a true number 1. I thought they should have tried a little harder for Blake Snell. I thought they should have tried a little bit harder for Corbin Burns, and they chose that they did not want to go to that level financially. Okay, fine, Orioles. Okay, Elias, if you want to say that you don't want to go that level for a starting pitcher, that's just fine. Don't turn around and tell me to look at these number 3, 4 type starters, maybe at best a number 2 in your rotation, and turn around and tell me that they're the greatest thing since sliced bread. When I look at them and I see, I don't know, a Honda Civic as far as rotation, this is a rotation that doesn't have the engine of a Ferrari, doesn't have the toughness of a truck. You look at this rotation here, and it's just a bunch of ho-hum guys that might be able to do very well on any given day, but none of them you're pointing to and saying, hey, he's the leader of our pitching staff. Hey, he's the leader of this team that's going to get us from a 4-game losing streak, and hey, I'm going to put a stop to it today. Get on my back, boys. I got you. None of those guys in that rotation have that ability. We'll have to see if they can do it for a game, maybe 2 during the season. But once you get to October, those guys are going to shrink. We've seen it before. This is a team that has shrunk in the postseason each of the last 2 years. And now you go into a postseason without a true number one in that rotation. That's a complete miss. That's a complete mistake for this Baltimore Orioles organization. I like what they've done as far as a position player standpoint. I like their depth as far as a position player standpoint. I like their lineup. I like the youth that they have in that lineup. I like the guys that they brought into that rotation as far as guys that I would figure to be a number 2 through 5 in that rotation. But they're missing that number one, the guy that's going to lead this rotation and stop a losing streak, that's going to carry this team when they are struggling in that rotation. None of the guys that they point to right now are going to be that guy this year. Could they have great years? Absolutely. Could they be a number 2? Absolutely. But none of them I'm pointing to and saying, hey, take the ball in game 1 versus Garrett Cole in the ALCS and get us a win, baby. It's not going to happen. Those guys are going to shrink under the lights when Garrett Cole is pitching at his best because he's been there, done that. He's an ace, and he can handle it. None of the pitchers that I mentioned from the Baltimore Orioles fit that description. Now, some of those guys might have been able to do it 5, 6, 7 years ago. Sugano might have been able to get there if he had come over at, say, 29, 30, 31 when he originally was looking to come over. He's now, 36 years old? He's not that guy anymore. Charlie Morton, anyway, another guy who at one point was considered a very good number 2 in a Houston Astros team, Pirates as well, the Atlanta Braves as well, but he was never really looked at as a number 1, and he's no longer a number 2 at this point in his career as well. Grayson Rodriguez was thought to be a true number 1 at some point because of how good he was as a prospect, has never lived up to that potential and still could elevate to a number 2, but I think the ability for him to be a number 1 has come and gone. We'll have to see what this rotation does going into the season, but like I said, that's a real mistake for me, is Elias saying, okay, I'm not willing to spend big on these guys, that's just fine. What's your plan then to get a true number 1 in this rotation? And turns out his plan so far, big asterisk, so far, is just to go with more quantity over quality in that starting rotation. And that's where I think they'll get into trouble if they don't make an addition at the deadline. I still think they will, because I think it would be a terrible mistake by Elias not to bring in a starting pitcher who can be a number 1 in this rotation. I think they will. But if they don't, this is a complete and total miss as an organization. Now is the time where they should be submitting more and more money towards that rotation because of how good their position player pool is. Now's their time to push their chips to the center, and Elias and company have chosen so far to hold those chips back. Maybe there's another pitcher out there that they have their eye on next offseason, but so far leaves a lot to be desired as far as their pursuit of a true number 1 pitcher in that rotation there. Let's see here. Cowboys Nation, if Povich can add a bit more velocity, he's a solid arm, I'd agree. I like the kid. He put a little weight on as well. I think Povich could be a good starting pitcher, but again, he's not a pitcher I'm looking at as a number 1 this year. Maybe he could get there in a couple of years, maybe 3 years. But for 2025, this is the season preview for the Baltimore Orioles for 2025. I'm not counting on Povich taking the ball in Game 1 versus Garrett Cole in the ALCS. It's not going to happen. So I think they need to go out there and trade for somebody. Let us know in the chat who you guys think they should trade for. Some of the names we've mentioned so far this offseason include Dylan Cease, Michael King, Luis Castillo, Sandy Alcantara, Framber Valdez, Pablo Lopez, and on and on and on that list goes. Let us know in the chat who you guys think they should go after, and we'll check up on those names here in just a moment. As far as their payroll for the Baltimore Orioles, this is why I say it's such a key for them to really go out there and invest in this team. Because look at these guys that are arbitration right now. You look Adley Rutschman, year 1 of arbitration, got 3 years before he hits free agency. He's already at a $5 million salary. Next year is probably going to be in that 10 to 11 category. 27, he's probably going to be in that $20 million category. Kramer is only at $2 million, but hitting arbitration levels. Wells, Bradish also hitting arbitration. Mountcastle, second year of arbitration, already at $7 million, only 1 year away from free agency after this season. Mullins going to be a free agent after the year as well. Then you look at their money that they already got doled out to players. Tyler O'Neill, one name that they signed this offseason, is right at the top of the heap here, signed for 3 years. But Zach Eflin will be a free agent after the year, making $18 million. Charlie Morton, $15 million, free agent at the end of the year. Sugano, $13 million, free agent at the end of the year. Notice the trend here. A lot of the money that they have could be coming off the books, which is a great thing for them. It means they have money that could be freed up for future long-term deals. But they've still shown an unwilling nature to go after any of these long-term signings here. So while we look at the Baltimore Orioles and we justly get onto them for not spending at the top of the market here, while 2025 payroll might be a little bit high for what they're comfortable with, look at their future commitments here. Just in those names that we mentioned here, that's 18 million, that's 33 million, that's another 46 million, that's 51, that's what, 60, 68, 74, or 76 anyway, 80-ish million dollars that they're going to have coming off the books on those deals, plus Soto and Mullins coming off the deal. And if you non-tender some of these guys next year, you're going to have a ton of money coming off the books here. Go on down to their payroll here. Right now they're at 177, well beneath the luxury tax threshold. They're not going to be a team that's going to push that threshold, however. But look at how much money they have committed for 26 and 27. 38 and $39 million. Absolutely nothing. Now pencil in roughly another $40 to $50 million on the high side for what those arbitration guys are going to be making. Even at that point, they're only going to be making, what, $90 million total? They could add a full $80 to $90 million in more payroll to get where they are this year, next offseason. So Baltimore, better buckle up. You might be signing one of the longer-term deals coming up. They also have to figure out what they're going to do with Adley Rutschman free agency. They're going to have to figure out what they're going to do with Mountcastle. They're going to have to figure out what to do with all the other guys that are going to be hitting free agency after this year that we just mentioned. Eflin, Morton, Sagano, Kittredge could be a free agent at the end of the year as well. Ryan O'Hearn, Sir Anthony Dominguez as well. Lots of names are going to be coming off the books here for the Baltimore Orioles. We'll see which direction they decide to go. Grayson's only 25, champ. I don't know about his window being closed. We'll see. I just hope we don't see a Cease in. Don't bring a Cease in and rather a Lopez, etc. But who knows with this front office that acts like they're handling the codes when it comes to contracts, preparing for a Henderson contract. I agree. They should be trying to do it the Rays. They should be trying to do it the Braves, the Athletics, the Mariners to a certain extent have tried doing, and that's securing some of their talent on a long-term deal. Think of how team-friendly of a deal that Ronald Acuna deal looks like, even with him missing significant time because of injury. That's kind of your best-case scenario as far as value there. Ozzie Albies is another great example of how signing these contracts can really work out for a team. However, you do get some of those cases where the contract does not work out. Dylan Moore hasn't worked out quite as well as the Mariners would have hoped. Some of the other deals that we've seen, the Rays sign for some of those pieces have not worked out as well. But Evan Longoria, that worked out pretty well. But by and large, these are markets that have to do things a little bit differently. Orioles, I think, are not in that same category, though. I think they have a little bit of money here to spend. That's why $177 million as far as a luxury tax payroll tells you that they have money to spend. So why didn't they go out there this offseason and try to go after and look at all that money that they have above my head? See all those blank spots? That's where they don't have money. That's where they can go out there and spend. So again, looking at their salaries just one last time, Adley Rutschman free agent in 28. So again, you're looking, what, $10 or $11 million next year, $20 million the year after that, and then nothing there. You hope he's still on the roster at that point, that he doesn't turn into Vlad Guerrero Jr., where he ultimately leaves in free agency. I think it's way too early to speculate about that, but trying to get that contract locked up, along with Gunnar Henderson, along with Jack and Holiday, trying to get some of those deals signed long-term so that you know what your numbers are going to look like going forward. Because if you can't afford the big money deals now, just waiting for a couple more years when you see the Juan Soto deal at $765 and go, hey, that deal really spurred values at this point. But even 3 years from now, those contracts that we're seeing today are going to look small in comparison to what we see then. So try to get those deals done now before the price goes even higher. Let's see here. Corbin Carroll, too. Yes, they need to get those long-term deals done. You don't want to get stuck with one of those big deals that doesn't work out because not a lot of these markets can handle it. We see teams like the Pittsburgh Pirates are a market that really can't handle a bad contract like that. That's why they might have to figure out what they're going to do with Paul Skeens in a couple of years here. Because right now I'm not sure Paul Skeens would even sign a long-term deal in Pittsburgh anyway. But even if he was willing to, I'm not sure if things went south. Say he had an injury issue. Say he blew out his arm and could never throw a ball again. Never want to wish injury on a player. But if that were to happen, the Pirates would be a team that couldn't recover from a contract of that nature. So we'll see what happens with some of these younger stars in the game and see if they can get some longer-term deals done as we gear up for opening day. Now is the time when we usually see some of those surprising multi-year deals from younger players as teams try to get some of those free agent years and buy those years out. So we'll see if Corbin Carroll, we'll see if Henderson, we'll see if Holiday, we'll see if Skeens ultimately get some deals done here before we get to opening day. All right. We discussed the payroll. We've discussed the prospects of this team. We've talked about their rotation, their lineup, their bench, their bullpen, all those things, where this team, how good this team currently looks. But we've talked a lot as well about the holes on this roster, being the number one starter in this rotation. So let's head over to baseball trade values and just kind of cook up a trade here. I want to look at the Baltimore Orioles looking at a true ace. We've talked a lot about Sandy Alcantara. We've talked a lot about Pablo Lopez, but I want to go somewhere off the board today. We'll start a little bit more challenging here and try to find a team that could have an ace that doesn't necessarily have him on the market right now. So looking at these teams, Angels, they don't really have an ace that they would be interested in. We've talked about Valdez. We could circle back to that one. Athletics, they don't have one. Blue Jays, Gosman, if he has a great year, could be in that discussion, but I don't think so. Braves, they're not going to trade you Spencer Strider. They're not going to give you any of their top-end starters. Brewers, they don't have a top-end starter to give away. Cardinals, maybe a Sonny Gray, but I'm not sure he still qualifies as a true ace. Cubs, they're not going to be trading any of their starters at this point. Diamondbacks, we've talked about Merrill Kelly and Zach Eflin, or not Zach Eflin, but Zach Gallen anyway. We could circle back to that one, so kind of keep in mind the Diamondbacks. Dodgers, that's not going to happen. They're keeping their starting pitching. Giants, if they fall out of contention, maybe they could look at Robbie Ray, but again, I don't view him as an ace at this point. Guardians, they don't have a piece that they're going to trade you at that level. Mariners, they have plenty of great starting pitching, but they want to keep that rotation together. If we get to the trade deadline, maybe they revisit the idea of possibly moving on from Luis Castillo in order to improve that offense. Marlins, we've talked a lot about Sandy Alcantara. Mets, they're not trading any of their starters away. They need starting pitching. Nationals have some good starters, but none that I would consider a true ace for a postseason series. Padres, if they're looking to offload Dylan Cease or Michael King, those could be options there. But again, we're looking for somebody controllable. Maybe if they wanted to give up a Musgrove or somebody along those lines. But again, injury issues. I don't think that's necessarily a fit at this point. Phillies, they really like their team that they have right now. They're really stuck financially with what they want to do. And I don't think they'd trade from their strength, which is that pitching staff. Pittsburgh, they have some good starting pitchers. None of them besides Paul Skeens I would consider an ace. Not going to happen. Rangers, they're not going to trade away some starting pitching. Rays, they're always open to pretty much everything. Maybe you could get in there for one of their starters. Could be a possibility. Reds, they're still looking for starting. You're not going to get rid of anything. Red Sox, they're still looking for starting pitching. They just acquired Garrett Crochet. They're not going to turn around and trade him. Rockies don't have an ace. Royals aren't going to trade you Colt Reagans. Tigers, I suppose at the trade deadline, if the Tigers are out of contention, maybe Tarek Skobal rumors kick up once again. That could be a name to watch there, especially with some young starting pitching coming there with Jackson Joe. Twins, we've talked a lot about Pablo Lopez, but they do have a couple of other starters that I think are really good 2 or 3s in a rotation that could be very helpful to somebody at the deadline, but they're looking for an ace, and they don't fit that description there. White Sox, they don't have an ace that they're looking at on this roster anymore that they'd be willing to trade. Yankees are looking to offload some salary, so you're not looking at Marcus Stroman and saying, hey, he's the answer to our prayers, trade him within the division. He'll take on Garrett Cole in Game 1 of ALCS. That ain't going to help you out. So let's circle back to the Arizona Diamondbacks. Let's say things go poorly for the Diamondbacks, or they just see that the price of starting pitching at the deadline is so high and they want to try to capitalize on it. Let's see what they could get. So the Diamondbacks, let's look at the majors here. We're going to look at guys with 1 year left on their deals. Zach Gallen, around 24 value. Merrill Kelly at only 7.7. I think Merrill Kelly isn't a true ace for this Orioles pitching staff. I think he would probably fall in there at a number 2 or a number 3 type pitcher. Zach Gallen, though, can be a Game 1 starting pitcher. Does he have as much ability as a Sandy Alcantara? Probably not. But let's say we do a Zach Gallen trade. Say they go the expiring option deal again here. So what could we do if we're the Orioles? So you go back over to the Orioles, you're looking around that 20-ish, 24 and a half total value. You're not giving up Bradish. Hurstead could be the first big piece in this deal. Povich could be a starting pitcher that could be a fit there. Kramer, I think they could go Bradfield. But I think they'll throw in Povich as far as the headliner in this deal. That's a pretty good starting pitcher going back. Let's say they go another pitcher like Fourette. We've thrown him in here quite a few different times this offseason in trade. Don't they have that competitive balance pick? Yes, there it is. I'm going to throw that competitive balance pick in here as well. So there's your trade. You get Zach Gallen if things are going poorly at the deadline in exchange for Povich for it, 2 pitching prospects. Povich immediately goes in the rotation for Gallen, and you get a competitive balance pick. Not too bad there. Now, of course, you'd have to figure out what you're going to do long term if you're going to sign him to a long-term deal. Swing and a miss with Jack Flaherty, swing and a miss for Corbin Burns. What happens in baseball? 3 strikes are out. I think if Elias swings and misses at another free agent or a free agent to be starting pitcher and fails to sign him long term, I think ownership is going to look long and hard at Elias there and just see if this is the right direction to continue to go after guys that are about to hit free agency as far as trade targets. But maybe they get that extension done. Zach Gallen would be taking him away from the Arizona Diamondbacks after the Diamondbacks took away Corbin Burns. So maybe a little bit of reciprocity there, but again, you're giving up the pick, you're giving up another prospect, and Povich, which has a good future for you in Baltimore. But you have to give to get, and this would be the price here. Not too bad of a trade. Let's go with something a little bit more along the lines of what we're looking for. Some controllable starting pitching here if we're Baltimore. Like we said, we've talked a lot about Sandy Alcantara. I'll kind of throw this one out there once again for those of you who haven't been paying attention to our videos here. Sandy Alcantara around 48 value. That's a big, big price. And remember, the Marlins are looking for cheaper, or they're looking for high-end talent, but they're also looking for very young talent. So they're looking at guys that are 20 years old or under. They're not looking at your guy that's ready to be in the big leagues right now. They want to be very, very bad for baseball for the next 2 or 3 years. That's why they want guys that are so young. That way they can kind of build up like they have in years past when the Marlins had their best teams, or when they had that big wave of talent hit all at once, and then the second they did great, they accomplished their goal, then they get rid of all that talent and start the cycle all over again here. So kind of keep that in mind with the Orioles. So first piece that kind of comes to mind here, Basayo, too much value here for Alcantara, not going to happen. Mayo, 22, too old here. Bradfield, 22, too old. And again, look how we're already in that 10 million range here. None of the pieces really fit for what the Orioles have to offer. So this is going to have to expand into a 3-team deal. Otherwise, the first 21-year-old that you get to is Honeycutt. First 20-year-old you get to is Michael Foret. You'd have to give up in the range of like 6 to 8 prospects to get the value of Alcantara straight up from the Orioles. So there's going to have to be a team that comes in that likes the older prospects of the Orioles and gives the younger ones to the Marlins. So let's look and see what we could do. Let's change this to a 3-team deal. Still keeping the 2 teams the same. But who could be a team that has some very young prospects that could go the other way? Let's look at the Los Angeles Dodgers. They have some really good high-end young prospects that they could deal here. Looking at the Dodgers side of things, DePaula could be a piece here. They could go with Zaire Hope, who could have a great year. I think he's due to really burst out and be a real force this year. In order for the Dodgers to give him up, in order to allow Alcantara to go there and not to the Dodgers, they would have to get something significant in return from the Orioles. So we'll throw in Hope in this deal for now, but just kind of keep in mind, in order for this deal to really work, you're going to have to give to get if you're the Orioles. So what could the Orioles give up that's around 48 value here? Well, you look at guys like, a Povich would be a piece that could be of interest, but not to the Dodgers. Hurstead could be a piece of interest to the Dodgers. I think he'd be a fit. Jackson Holiday at the top of the market. I don't think you're trading him, though. Bradish, I don't think you're trading him in this deal. So it just becomes a little bit harder to match a 3-team deal because, again, look at these older pieces that they have that they could include a deal, Bradfield, etc. Sure, they could get those older prospects over the Dodgers, but I think the Dodgers would prefer to just hold on to Hope, and if they were going to trade those pieces anyway, why wouldn't they just take their package of pieces and try to bring in Alcantara anyway? So that's just kind of something I wanted to kind of throw out there. I was beginning to think Alcantara would be a great option for the Orioles, but unless they're getting another team in there that's going to give up the young pieces there that makes sense for them, I don't think there's going to be a 3-team deal that works. Let's take out the Dodgers and say they go to a team that's not expected to compete for a playoff spot. Let's say they go to, a team that's going to be younger, that's looking for, older prospects that are ready to hit the big leagues right now. A team like the Pirates comes to mind here. Do the Pirates have the young pieces in their prospect system that could go to the Marlins? Tamar Johnson around 13, that could be piece number 1. Griffin could be another one. That's a good one here, but they're looking for more position players. Severino Sanford doesn't really fit either. Let's do a different team. Let's do the Angels. Dana, maybe, but again, looking for more position players. Rada and Lugo, not good enough. Let's go to a different team. Let's do the A's. A's are always looking for MLB-ready talent, especially on the pitching side. Let's see if they did younger pieces here. They really don't have anything there that they could work with. Let's go to the bottom of the stack here with the White Sox. They got a bunch of young talent, but none of it would be to the liking of what the Marlins are looking for via trade. Let's go to the bottom again and just see what we could do here. Let's do the Rockies, see if they have anything here. And again, nothing really to speak of. It's just tough to find a team that matches up well for the Marlins for what they're looking for without the Dodgers looking at Alcantara and saying, hey, Orioles, why am I allowing you to get the best player when I can take that same package of players and go after him myself? So let's take out the Marlins from this equation and go back to a two-team deal. Let's go to another team that has some controllable starting pitching here. Let's go with the Cardinals just to look at where they are with some of their starting pitching. Starting pitchers, value. Fetty, the most valuable one. Doesn't really move the needle. Let's look on the opposite side of things. Matz and Sonny Gray, no real value there. You're not taking on the money of a Sonny Gray anyway. Doesn't look like a good fit. Twins will go to last here, but I just want to check on a few other teams just to see if anything else makes sense. Let's say the Mariners, get creative at the deadline. They fall out of contention. They're willing to trade Luis Castillo, but the Orioles decide to get a little frisky here and try to bring in a Logan Gilbert or a George Kirby. Say they do something, really crazy like that. I would try to go after Logan Gilbert out of those three, out of those young starting pitchers. I don't think they would move him, but I think the Orioles have a nice package that they could put together if they decided to go down that route. I think the package would probably have to start with Jackson Holliday. So Jackson Holliday goes the other way. You're going to have to include another 30 as far as value. I think you'd have to include Povich in this deal to go back the other way. I think Hurstead would have to be close to this deal as well. That gets you pretty darn close already. Say instead of Gilbert, you go after Kirby. Again, I don't think this is overly likely. But if you're the Orioles and you're just trying to get real creative, this could be like a dream scenario that you're hoping comes to pass, is that the Mariners just look at their young rotation and say, hey, our offenses continue to struggle. We have some good pieces coming offensively, but we want offense right now. So we want to go out there and try to bring it in. So what else could they try to bring in? Maybe they bring in a Colby Mayo. I just want to show you guys just how unrealistic this trade is for them to go after a piece like these controllable pieces from the Mariners. This trade ain't going to happen either. Even if you take Povich out and put in another smaller piece, you're not giving up 3 future building blocks of your organization for George Kirby, even though he would be a very good number one at the top of your rotation. It's just not going to happen. So let's go ahead and clean out this trade a little bit and get a little bit more back into reality here for the Orioles. Where could they go for a true number one at the top of their rotation? Astros, Framber Valdez, but the controllable one, of course, is with the Minnesota Twins with Pablo Lopez. You could also go for a Joe Ryan or a Bailey Ober, but I think they would go after Pablo Lopez because I think he has the lowest value here on these 3 options. I think that the Twins are a team that's ripe to make a big trade as well. So I think they're willing to make a move, whereas some of these other teams that I mentioned, like the Mariners, are not willing to move from their biggest strength, which is that starting pitching. So what could the Orioles give up that would make it worth it to the Twins? I think they would want younger pieces as well, not necessarily teenagers like the Mariners are looking for. So I think they could be a little bit more of a natural fit here. I think we're looking kind of in the range of a Bradfield kind of a piece. I think we're looking in the Hurstead kind of a piece offensively. And then I think you're looking for some starting pitching here to go back in that deal as well. McDermott would make some sense as far as a piece that could immediately go into the rotation. Looking at the value already, we're about 17 away. 17 value could put Povich in this deal to the Twins, gives them three pieces that could two pieces that immediately go into their big league team. Bradfield could be there in a year, and then you go with a very young option here, kind of like a let's go at age here. Say you throw in a 17-year-old shortstop to kind of just finish off the deal here, and there you go. Validate the trade, post it. This is a trade we could actually see at the deadline, whereas Alcantara is a little bit more unlikely, but I think this would be a trade that could get the deal done. Is it a big price to pay if you're the Orioles? Absolutely. You're giving up three players with a bright future in your organization. But here's the difference from what you did last year and the year before, bringing in Flaherty and Burns. Pablo Lopez is signed long-term. He's signed for 3 years, 2 years plus this year currently. He's going to be on that roster for a couple of different pennant races. And his free agency is going to be in the middle of all the arbitration years that you're going to have for Henderson, that you're going to have for Holiday, that you're going to have for Mayo, etc. You're going to have to get those long-term deals done with the other pieces in this team, like an Adley Rutschman, but you're going to have Pablo Lopez for at least the next 2.5 years if you get this deal done at the deadline as well. Overall, this would be the type of a trade that I think elevates this offseason for the Orioles from a B- to an A+. So that would be something I would keep an eye on for the Orioles to try to get done at the deadline. Right now, if they go after Dylan Cease, that's a possibility out there, a little bit lower cost. But again, we've talked about this before. Jack Flaherty, they bring him in, doesn't work out via trade, so they go ahead and let him leave in free agency. He signs with the Tigers, has a great year last year, gets traded at the deadline to the Dodgers, and helps them win a World Series. Ends up signing once again with the Tigers this offseason. Last year, Corbin Burns is traded for right before the beginning of the season anyway. Corbin Burns, great starting pitcher for the Orioles last year, finished 5th in the AL Cy Young voting, if I remember correctly. And they ultimately just say, hey, we have no interest in really signing you to a long-term deal, even when they made the deal, because they thought the compensation they would get back for losing him in free agency would be worth it compared to what they gave up to be able to bring him in the first place. I get it. Sunk cost at this point, moving on. So they've missed on Flaherty. They've missed on Burns. Now they go after another guy that could be a free agent at the end of the year, like a Cease or a Valdez or something along those lines. Big question marks would be raised around Elias. And if they don't sign him long-term, then I think ownership will have the questions at that point as far as what's the long-term plan for the Orioles as far as a true number one. This trade here would solve that issue for them. All right, so where will they finish in 2025? Big caveat here, big asterisk. Barring any significant moves, barring them adding a true ace, this is a team I still think is playoff bound. I think they're more than likely a wild card team at best. I don't think they threaten the Yankees or Red Sox at the top of this division. I think those two teams are a step above where the Orioles are right now. I do think they're a little bit better than the Rays. I think the Blue Jays are the bottom in this division. But I think the Orioles are good enough to get into the wild card spot with, that 89 to 92 win threshold. Let's look at where they finished last year to kind of get an idea. Last year they finished with 91 wins, and that's with Corbin Burns, with the additions that they've made to that rotation and kind of giving them multiple options in the outfield. I think they still finish right around that same mark, might slip a win or two when it's all said and done, but I think they win one of those final wild card spots this year. Do I think they're as good of a team as they were last year? No. And that's because they don't have an ace. So if they, say they don't get that ace as currently constructed, I think they get to a wild card spot. I don't think they sniff getting out of the first round, their first playoff series at all. I think they get bounced immediately. So unless they add a true ace to the staff, I think their season would be over at that point. If they add an ace, this is a team that could easily elevate themselves into that conversation to being, winning that division in a very difficult AL East, especially if things go poorly in the beginning of the year for the Red Sox as they adjust to Devers and Bregman being on the roster and figuring out their defensive alignment. The Yankees trying to figure out life post Juan Soto as they watch him, launch homers over there with the New York Mets. But if things go a little bit less than stellar for them, if they add a true number one, the Orioles could once again finish on top in the AL East. So we'll see if that happens. I doubt that happens at the moment just because I think both of the other two teams I mentioned are pretty solid. I don't think they'll have that big of a fall off from losing Juan Soto as some were thinking they might. I think regular season, both teams will be just fine. For the Orioles, they have to bring in a true number one. If they add a number one here, I think this team balloons to, say, a 95, 96 win threshold. As currently constructed, I'm going to say pretty firmly in that 89 to 91 win threshold, win a wild card spot, and get bounced immediately in the postseason. As far as expectations for this roster, I think they will add a number one to this rotation. If they add a number one to the rotation, I think they get out of the first round of the playoffs, and I think they have a chance to get to the ALCS, but I think they still fall just a little bit short because until I know who that option is going to be, I can't pencil in how this team is really going to work or who they give up to bring him in as well. Interesting things to kind of keep an eye on as the season goes along. Welcome in, Justin. Appreciate you joining us. What happened? Corbin Carroll's fine. They were just talking about trying to get a contract extension done with some of those younger stars in the game, like a Paul Skeens, Corbin Carroll, Gunnar Henderson, Jackson Holliday, among several others. Cowboys Nation, 91 wins. Patching starters in. We literally lost a five-man rotation to injuries. I'll give you that one. I do like the Orioles as far as a team. You know, they have had their own injury issues, but with a patchwork rotation, I can't really elevate where their team goes this year. And that's even with a patchwork rotation this year because I'm calling guys in that 2, 3, 4 range a more of a patchwork group of guys, a motley crew, if you will, than rather a true number one at the head and then a true number two in that rotation. Any one of those guys that I mentioned could be the number two, but none of them are a proven, tried and true option at that number two spot in that rotation, which also gives me some pause. They're going to have to get some good run out of those guys here. Cowboys Nation 2025 AL East champs, bookmark it. Possibly, if they add a true number one, maybe they get that done, especially if you get it done early in the year, even if it is for a guy that's headed towards free agency. You know, it's all about 2025. There are several teams that say they're all in on 2025. If the Orioles go once again for a short-term deal, guy who's about to hit free agency, I think we're going to get as close to all in as the Orioles are going to be for the foreseeable future. This is a team that needs to solve that rotation, and however they get it done, they have to solve it at some point before the trade deadline. If they don't, they're dead in the water. They're not going to do anything once they get to October. As far as trades, we just mentioned how they need to go after an ace, and I think they will try to get one. I think they will land a number one type of starting pitcher. How good remains to be seen. Offseason grade, I think if they had added in a true number one, I think we're talking an easy A here for what the Baltimore Orioles have done this offseason. They've done a really nice job moving on from Santander, saving a little bit of money here, adding some depth options to the outfield. I like what they've got as far as an infield mix as well. But that pitching staff needs a true number one, and that's why this offseason grade, I'm going to go ahead and give them a B minus. I think just having not having a true ace in that staff is going to hurt. The only reason it's not lower is because, again, I think they will add one. The question is, how quickly do they get it done? And if they do strike out adding a true number one, how quickly does Elias and the rest of that front office answer for not solving that issue in offseason or before the trade deadline as well? As far as growth and surprises, we're talking Gunnar Henderson, we're talking Jackson Holliday, some of the younger arms in that rotation as well. I think they could surprise us a little bit. Like I said, say they get the ace, say they elevate their performance. Holliday hits the ground running as an AL Rookie of the Year candidate, etc. All that's very likely or very possible, I should say. Maybe they elevate to say that 96, 97 win threshold. As far as the ceiling of this team, I think at best they get to the ALCS, but more than likely, I think they fall just a little bit short, even if they add a true number one. I think that they just don't quite have the oomph to get there. They might surprise me. Injuries might take down some other teams that are in the mix here. But if all things are equal, for what we know with all the teams right now, I would say the Orioles, even with an addition of a number one, fall a little bit short of making it to the ALCS, which is tough because, again, Baltimore's really struggled once they got to October. They need a number one. They have to get one, and I think they will. As far as kind of the floor for this team, say this team does not add an ace. Say we have an injury issue to Rutschman behind the plate, their true advantage as a roster. Say the division itself is a lot better than expected, and this is supposed to be a good division as well. This could be a team that finishes on the outside looking in. Let's just do the math on it real quick. Say the Yankees go chalk and win the division. That means they're going to have to win one of the 3 wild card spots. Let's just say for kicks and giggles, the Guardians win the division in the Central. The Texas Rangers win the division in the AL West. I think Houston easily claims one of the wild card spots. I think the Red Sox easily claim one of the wild card spots. Then you're talking about teams like the Tigers, Royals, Orioles, Rays, Mariners, etc., all fighting for that final wild card spot. And I'm curious to see if the Orioles would be the best of that bunch there. I just don't think it would happen, and so I think this is a team that would fall out of the postseason picture at that point. I think they're a very good roster for the 162-game season, which is why I think their win total might be a little bit elevated if they fail to get that ace option there. But again, the warts will show once they get to October. They'll be bounced very quickly unless they add an ace. Notice how I keep saying that, but that's kind of the story here for Baltimore. They have to get an ace. Until they do, it's an incomplete as far as that part of their roster is concerned. But looking at this Orioles team, this is a team that's ready to win right now. The rotation is solid outside of needing a number one. Bullpen looks very good, and they have some more talent on the way as far as reinforcements. This is a team that should be investing in starting pitching, and for some reason, 2 straight off seasons have failed to acquire a true number one for that starting staff via free agency. We'll see if they solve that issue going forward. But as far as a floor for 2025, I think at worst we're probably talking in that 82 to 86 win threshold. I think they're too good to fall under 500 this year based on that offense. The question is, once they get to October, if that offense can elevate even further, if they add another starting pitcher, etc. All those are big question marks with the Orioles organization. This has been your 2025 season preview for the Baltimore Orioles. Appreciate you guys joining us this evening. Let us know in the chat where you guys think the Orioles finish this year. I think the Orioles themselves internally are having their own discussions about where they think they're going to go, how confident they feel in this rotation, how Sugano is adjusting to life in the USA, how the rest of their younger pitchers are starting to develop, how some of their older pitchers on their current rotation might elevate their game. All this is up in the air for Baltimore, and they're going to have to solve that riddle as far as what they're going to do in that rotation. Remains to be seen if they go after a Dylan Cease, a Framber Valdez, or any of these other guys that are on free agents to be, or if they go after a more controllable option, like we mentioned during our video today, in Pablo Lopez. All right, appreciate you guys joining us for the 2025 season preview for the Baltimore Orioles. Tomorrow, we'll be getting into the Cincinnati Reds to continue our series on our 2025 season preview series as well. Cowboys Nation, I can't see them rushing Bradish back either. I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't see the bump this season. Again, I don't think they're going to rush Bradish back. I do think he'll pitch this year at some point. You never know when, but I can't count on him for innings. You know, when you're penciling in how many innings you can count on from your starting pitchers, from your bullpen, from your minor leagues, I can't put a specific number next to Bradish because of the injury. I can't go to his number or go right next to his line and say, hey, Bradish should be back around the middle of August, somewhere in there. You know, I'll pencil him in for 6 or 7 starts, say 40 to 50 innings. You can't even count on that because of the injury red flags. I'd kind of picture him as Tyler Mahle last year for the Rangers. Anything you get out of him is pure gravy. Hopefully next year will be better for him in 26 than 25 will be. Where would I rank the pen? Dodgers, to me, easily have one of the best pens in baseball. I'd put the Orioles pen probably in the borderline top 5, maybe top 7 pens in the game. They're right in that category for me. It is certainly not a weakness on this team. I will say that. I think they are going to have to figure out how they're going to ease Felix Bautista back into that role as well. And I think that's why I don't have them a little bit higher. If Bautista was coming into the year fully healthy, ready to go, no injury red flags, etc., then I'd probably have this bullpen a lock in that top 5. But because of the injury issues, kind of making sure he's healthy once you get to October being the most important thing, I think I'm going to hold back a little bit on that ranking and say somewhere top 5, top 7 range is what feels about right for the Baltimore Orioles. Let's head over to X and just see if anything is happening this evening before we log off. Red Sox are dealing with a little bit of an injury issue in their rotation right now, but they are getting some good news on a couple of guys, including Lucas Giolito, who looks ready to throw his first live batting practice tomorrow. We'll have to see how he really goes there. Mike Clevenger for the White Sox, they're going to be using him as a reliever this year. Remember, he signed the deal last year with the White Sox, ultimately signed a minor league deal once again with the White Sox this year. We'll see if he gives them some length. I think this is a good depth option for them if things don't work out with Martin Perez, but we'll see how Clevenger really does there. Again, injuries for the Texas Rangers to deal with. Alejandro Rosario dealing with an injury that'll keep him out the entirety of the 25 season. Hopefully, he'll get back and be better than ever next year. But again, what's up with the Rangers continuing to have injury issues with their top prospects, especially pitching prospects? Wyatt Langford has a oblique strain. He'll be taking the field very gingerly for the next couple of weeks, I imagine. Rangers, in fact, are going to sit him essentially 5 to 7 days was the estimation. Bruce Bochy expressed the absolute confidence that Wyatt Langford will be in the lineup on opening day. However, and of course, they added Kevin Pillar to their fourth outfield mix to see if they can get some production from that offense against left-handed pitchers. All right, yeah, appreciate you as always, champ. Thanks, Cowboys Nation. Appreciate you guys joining us. Again, tomorrow we'll do the Cincinnati Reds. Be sure to join us, hit that like and subscribe. Have a few more videos that we made coming out for you tomorrow, so check those out as well. If you guys want to check out some of our other season preview videos, you can check those out. We'll have the shortened versions of what we've done every single one of these team previews and kind of update you guys on those or post those as we get closer to opening day as well. So appreciate your support. Thank you for liking, subscribing, and hitting those hearts in the chat. It really does mean a lot to us. Follow us on X at UpsideSN and on Facebook, Upside Sports Network. But most importantly, hit that subscribe button. That's where it really does help us out. So I want to thank you guys for doing that for us as well. Mark, this was enjoyable. Oh, second or third in the East. I'd probably say third. I think the Yankees and Red Sox are just a tick above. If they add an ace, I think they could jump above one of those two teams relatively easily as far as which one is having a little bit worse of a year. Then they'll be right there with the Yankees or Red Sox, whoever's at the top for the division crown. I think they'll fall a little bit short because of them having to do that at the deadline rather than having that ace throughout the entirety of the season. That guy they turn to and say, hey, we've had a 4-game losing streak because we brought in Framber Valdez. We know today is win day. Because we brought in Dylan Cease. Today we know, even though we don't have the best our best game on our best game right now, we're going to still have a real good chance to win. And none of the starting pitchers that they have in the rotation really give that kind of confidence. Maybe one of those guys could elevate. But as of right now, I can't count on it until we see it proven. And we certainly won't see it proven for the postseason because that's been their bugaboo the last couple of years now. We'll see if they solve that issue this year. Conversation Go O's ready for April already? No kidding. I was watching Victory Plus anyway to watch the Stars game before I came on the air. That's why it took a little bit of time to get on. I was watching a chaotic third period for the Stars and Islanders game. But in the middle of one of their commercials, Victory Plus, as you know, now has the rights to the Texas Rangers. They will be broadcasting all their local games essentially. Of course, they'll have the national TV games that'll be on another channel. There'll be a Friday package as well for another channel. But primarily, Victory Plus will have the majority of the games. And the thing popped up on the screen to get the season pass for the Texas Rangers. And, if you scan the QR code and whatnot, you could have gotten the tickets to go to the two tickets to go to a Rangers game this year. Just gave me chills watching it. And just I'm excited for baseball to be back. Watching spring training, even just the little clips we get, is exciting to me. And I'm really hoping we get to see some real exciting baseball this year across the entirety of the league. Not just from my favorite team or your favorite team, but I want to see really good baseball being played. I want to get excited for baseball again. I'm already excited for it. I already got goosebumps right now just talking about baseball and how excited I am for the season. So hopefully it's as exciting as we're all hoping it really is. Ovi with the hat trick, yes. I did not see Ovi got one. I did see Jason Robertson got his in the Stars game. All 3 goals in the second period. I know his brother also had 2 goals and counting in the Toronto game. I'm not sure how many he ended up with as well. This Caps turnout has been awesome to watch this season. I actually went to the game today. Oh, okay. I guess then Ovi did get the hat trick. I did not see that though. I did see a headline that he was in the range of like 24 goals behind as far as the count now. I'm trying to remember if it was 24 or 21 now. But either way, hopefully Ovi gets there by the end of the year. All right. Appreciate you guys joining us. Thank you for watching the 2025 season preview for the Baltimore Orioles. Tomorrow we'll be live around 9:30 with the Cincinnati Reds. Appreciate you guys joining us. Y'all have a great evening. Stay safe out there, everybody.